guilty of 19 charges involving fabricating evidence and arresting innocent people, was sentenced to 12 years and 6 months in prison this afternoon.
The unclassified felony of armed criminal action, the court finds the defendant guilty.
I discharged around to say center mass.
The world of law enforcement is a stronghold of fairness, where those who break the law are brought to justice. However, there are times when the people tasked with upholding the law become corrupt, using their power and authority for personal gain. These corrupt cops really thought they were above the law, but ended up with a one-way ticket to prison. Here are the top 10 corrupt cops reacting to life sentences. Number 1. Daniel Holtzclaw. Daniel Holtzclaw was born in December 1986 in Guam. His father was Eric Holtzclaw, a lieutenant in the Enid Police Department. Holtzclaw attended Enid High School, where he played football as a linebacker, and during one game he set a school record for 25 tackles. He attended Eastern Michigan University and graduated with a criminal justice degree in 2010. Despite his aspirations to play professional football, he was unsuccessful and instead joined the Oklahoma City Police Department. Holtzclaw was not a good officer. He was found guilty of assaulting numerous women hailing from a low-income area of the city. The police investigators claimed he would perform background checks on women with outstanding warrants or criminal records and deliberately singled out those women as his victims. In the courtroom, tension was high as former police officer Daniel Holtzclaw awaited his sentence. He had been convicted on 18 charges, and the jury had recommended a staggering 263 years in prison. His eyes were filled with tears, and he shivered as he waited to hear his fate. The victims, detectives, and attorneys working on the case for a year and a half were relieved when the 263-year prison term was handed down to Holtzclaw. Lead Detective Kim Davis held the hand of the victims throughout the entire process and expressed her satisfaction with the sentence, saying, "It's what I wanted. I wanted to ensure that he doesn't get out, and I'm happy with it." Victims advocate Sherry Dickerson had been in the courtroom for the entire trial, and although she wanted to jump for joy when hearing the sentence, she also expressed concern for Holtzclaw and his family. "His choices have led to the destruction of his life," Dickerson said. "I have empathy for his family. I hope he can be rehabilitated and possibly, if there's any good, that he would be able to mentor other predators to change their habits and lifestyle." Holtzclaw, 29, at his sentencing, glared at the three victims as they read their impact statements. However, the victims never looked his way, refusing to give him the satisfaction of their attention. For Holtzclaw, his life had taken a drastic turn. Once a respected police officer, he faced life imprisonment for his heinous crimes. His choices had led him down a dark path, and now he would have to pay the price for his actions. Holtzclaw's tears and shivering in the courtroom reflected his deep regret for what he had done and the consequences he would now face. Number 2. Derek Chauvin. Derek Chauvin is a former Minneapolis police officer who made national headlines for his involvement in the death of George Floyd, who passed away after Chauvin knelt on his neck for greater than 9 minutes during an arrest. Chauvin's actions were captured on video and triggered widespread protests to counter police brutality and racial injustice. Chauvin grew up in the Twin Cities area. He attended Park High School in Cottage Grove and played football for the school's team. After graduation, he attended Normandale Community College and then transferred to Metropolitan State University, where he earned a bachelor's degree in law enforcement in 2006. In 2001, Chauvin joined the Minneapolis Police Department and became a field training officer in 2008. He had 18 complaints filed against him during his time on the force, but only 2 resulted in disciplinary action. He was involved in several use-of-force incidents, including a 2017 incident in which he was one of several officers who shot and took the life of a suspect. On May 25, 2020, Chauvin and 3 other cops acknowledged a call about a man trying to use a counterfeit $20 bill at a convenience store. They encountered George Floyd, a 46-year-old black man, in the driver's seat of a parked car nearby. Floyd was handcuffed and placed on the ground face down while Chauvin knelt on his neck for more than 9 minutes. Floyd repeatedly said he couldn't breathe and eventually became unresponsive. He passed away at the hospital. The jury found Chauvin guilty on all 3 charges. After his bail was canceled, he was remanded into custody. On June 25, 2021, Chauvin was sentenced to 22.5 years in prison, with credit for time served. He also faces federal charges for violating Floyd's civil rights. Chauvin's reaction to his sentence was stoic. He removed his mask and spoke briefly, offering condolences to the Floyd family, but did not express remorse for his actions. He also filed an appeal of his conviction, claiming that the jury was biased and that the trial was unfair. The sentencing was met with mixed reactions. Some people felt that the sentence was too lenient and that Chauvin should have received a longer prison term, while others thought that the sentence was appropriate and that it sent a message that police officers were not above the law. The trial and sentencing of Derek Chauvin have been seen as a pivotal moment in the struggle against racial injustice in the United States. Number 3. Michael Dautro. Michael Dautro was a police officer with the Edison Police Department in New Jersey. He joined the force in 2003 and quickly climbed up the ladder, becoming a sergeant in 2011. Throughout his career, Dautro was praised for his work and dedication to the community. However, his promising career came crashing down when he was charged with multiple crimes. In 2017, Dautro pleaded guilty to federal charges of attempted obstruction of justice and conspiracy to tamper with witnesses. He admitted to his wrongdoing and acknowledged that he had violated the law and the trust placed in him as a police officer. In 2019, Dautro was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison for his crimes. He also asked the judge for leniency, citing his previously clean record and desire to be a good father to his children. However, the judge was not swayed by Dautro's words and handed down a tough sentence, noting the seriousness of the crimes and that Dautro was a police officer who had violated the public trust. Dautro's reaction to the conviction was subdued. He appeared in court wearing a green prison jumpsuit. He remained composed without any visible response as the judge delivered the verdict. Dautro's demeanor remained unchanged, and he did not make any statements or show any signs of remorse during the sentencing hearing. His lack of emotional response to the severity of his sentence left many observers puzzled, as they expected some reaction, such as remorse or repentance for his actions. Dautro's stoic and detached demeanor during his sentencing further underscored the gravity of his crimes and the lack of guilt he displayed in the face of the consequences. He said he was apologetic for what he had done and had let down his family and the community. However, some people were skeptical of his apology, given the extremes of his crimes and the fact that he had maintained his innocence throughout the trial. Dautro's case was a major scandal for the Edison Police Department, which had already been under scrutiny for allegations of corruption and misconduct. The department was criticized for handling the case, as several officers allegedly involved in the conspiracy were allowed to retire or resign before facing disciplinary action. The case also had broader implications for law enforcement in New Jersey, highlighting the dangers of police misconduct and the need for greater accountability and oversight. Number 4. Zachary Wester. Zachary Wester was a former sheriff's deputy in Jackson County, Florida. But behind his polished badge and uniform, Wester harbored a dark secret. He became addicted to the power of his position and began to abuse his authority in ways that would shock his colleagues and the entire community. He was convicted of multiple charges, including racketeering, official misconduct, perjury, fabricating evidence, and possession of controlled substances. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison on September 7, 2021. Wester's crime spree began in 2016 when he began targeting innocent motorists and planting narcotics on them during routine traffic stops. His actions were discovered when a driver complained about him and an investigation began. The investigation found that Wester had been planting drugs on people for years and was arrested in 2019. Wester's background includes a troubled history. He was previously terminated from a job at a different law enforcement agency in Florida in 2016 for failure to meet agency standards. Despite this, he was able to obtain a job as a deputy in Jackson County. During his trial, Wester maintained his innocence, claiming he had been set up and did not plant anything illegal on anyone. However, the evidence presented against him was overwhelming, and the jury found him guilty on 19 counts. During his trial, some of the body cam footage was deleted. When asked about this, Wester said he wished he knew the answer. He continued to lie, saying the narcotics were there and he didn't put them there. Wester's attitude in court was described as arrogant and dismissive. He showed little repentance for his actions and appeared to be more concerned with protecting his reputation than accepting responsibility for his crimes. Some of the victims of his crimes were present in the courtroom during the trial and sentencing, and they expressed satisfaction with the outcome. In addition to his 12-year prison sentence, Wester was also ordered to pay over $100,000 in fines. The community of Jackson County and beyond grapples with the aftermath of Wester's crimes, and the pursuit of justice and the demand for accountability continue to be at the head of the struggle for a fair and just criminal justice system. Number 5. Eric DeValconaire. Former police detective Eric DeValconaire was sentenced to 6 years for fatally assaulting Cameron Lamb in 2019. The incident occurred when DeValconaire and his partner acknowledged a traffic incident involving a red pickup truck in Kansas City. The officers arrived at the home and entered the backyard without a legal warrant, dressed in plain clothes and wearing police department vests. Lamb was slowly reversing the pickup truck down a ramp into the basement garage when DeValconaire fired 4 times at him, claiming he saw Lamb's left hand reach for a weapon and point it at his partner. Lamb passed away at the scene. During the trial, DeValconaire narrated the incident and cried from time to time. In November 2021, a judge found him guilty in a bench trial, and he was sentenced to 3 years for involuntary taking a man's life and 6 years for armed criminal actions. The sentences are to be served concurrently. Defense attorneys had requested that DeValconaire remain free following his sentencing as they appealed his conviction. Judge James Dale Youngs granted that plea, saying he did not believe incarceration was crucial during the appeals process. After hearing the sentence, DeValconaire held his hand at the desk and looked completely shocked. Lamb's mother, Lori Bay, called the verdict a fair decision. She expressed that the mental pain she deals with will not go away. Lamb's stepfather, Akil Bay, added that he hopes the sentence will shake up the Kansas City Police Department. This incident has sparked much debate and discussion around police brutality and racial profiling in the United States. Black Americans are mostly affected by police violence, and many believe that this incident is yet another example of the systemic racism that permeates law enforcement in the country. The fact that DeValconaire claimed he saw Lamb reach for a gun has also been a point of contention. Many believe this was an excuse for excessive force and that the officers should have used non-lethal methods to subdue Lamb. The fact that Lamb was slowly backing his truck into a garage suggests that he was not an immediate threat to anyone and that the officers had time to assess the situation before resorting to deadly force. Number 6. Charlie Reeder. Pike County, Ohio's former sheriff, has faced serious criminal charges, including 2 counts of theft in office and tampering with evidence. The accusation started in 2019 when he was suspected of using money from narcotic busts to fund his gambling addiction, amounting to about $5,000. Despite reports of the incident, the sheriff tried to give an excuse for his actions by claiming that he used the cash to help the community, a statement readers found hard to believe. During his trial, the sheriff faced the charges against him, and it became clear that he had taken the money for personal use. He had tried to cover his tracks by reporting the stolen funds as used for community support, but readers saw through his pitiful attempt at saving face. Despite the evidence against him, the sheriff hoped to avoid jail time by giving an emotional speech before sentencing. With tears filling his eyes, he requested the judge not to send him to prison, taking responsibility for his actions and admitting that he had tarnished the image of the sheriff's office. The judge was not swayed by his emotional speech and had a question for the sheriff. The judge asked why the denominations of the money he claimed to have used for community support did not match those taken from the crime scene or the individuals involved. Clearly, the sheriff had taken the money for personal use, and he could not deny it. The judge sentenced the former sheriff to 6.5 years of prison time for his crimes, including theft in office and tampering with evidence. However, the sheriff's counts would run concurrently, and he would only serve 3 years behind bars. As part of his plea, the former sheriff would also be banned from working in any public office in Ohio. Number 7. David Oliver. David Oliver, the former police chief of Brimfield Township, was charged with 4 misdemeanor charges, which included unlawful restraint, attempted theft, simple assault, and unauthorized use of the property. The police chief was famous for his blunt and humorous commentary on Facebook about criminals that he referred to as mopes. However, he faced a new reality when charged with multiple misdemeanors. The judge presiding over his case called him a mope himself. He pleaded no contest to counts such as attempted theft in office and assault involving a female officer named Crystal Casterline, who accused him of harassment. Crystal Casterline had worked under David Oliver, and she told the judge that he was the one who harassed her and demanded that the plea agreement was not enough punishment. She stated that she was a marathon runner who loved life and snuggled her little girls constantly. But she was naive and never understood how domestic violence could escalate to such a degree. She accused Oliver of hugging her, which then escalated to groping, trapping her, and forcing her to press her body into his and dance with him. Oliver disputed many of the allegations against him, but still pleaded guilty to all charges so he could move forward with his life. During the hearing, Oliver became visibly resistant as he pleaded no contest to counts such as attempted theft in office and assault involving Crystal Casterline. He was given 2 years of probation and restitution, and he will never be a police officer again. David Oliver was enraged when he heard some allegations against him, but he pled guilty to all charges. The judge presiding over his case called him a mope himself, which was ironic because he used to refer to criminals as mopes in his Facebook posts. Oliver was famous for his funny and sarcastic commentary on Facebook, but he faced a new reality when charged with multiple misdemeanors. David Oliver had garnered a small following on Facebook due to his humorous commentary about criminals. However, his luck depleted when he was charged. He pleaded no contest to counts involving attempted theft in office and assault involving Crystal Casterline, a female officer who accused him of harassment. In the end, David Oliver was sentenced to 2 years of probation and restitution and barred from ever being a police officer again. His former Facebook followers were disappointed to hear about his charges and sentencing, which was a reminder that even those in positions of power could be held accountable for their actions. Number 8. Marcus Eberhardt. Marcus Eberhardt, a former police officer in East Point, Michigan, made headlines in 2019 when he used a taser on 38-year-old William Marshall during an arrest and took his life. Eberhardt was subsequently charged with involuntary manslaughter and misconduct in office. Eberhardt had served as a police officer for several years before the incident. According to reports, he had no history of disciplinary action before the incident, but he was known to be a relatively aggressive officer. Marshall, on the other hand, had a history of narcotics abuse and arrests for nonviolent offenses. During the trial, it was revealed that Eberhardt had used the taser on Marshall for over 40 seconds, far longer than departmental policy allowed. The prosecutor argued that Eberhardt had used excessive force and was responsible for Marshall's death. The defense argued that Eberhardt had followed his training and that Marshall's narcotics use and underlying health conditions were the cause of his death. In February 2022, Eberhardt was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter and misconduct in office by a jury. It was the first time in Michigan history that a police officer had been convicted of a crime for using a taser. Eberhardt's sentencing hearing was scheduled for May 2022, and he could face up to 15 years in prison if convicted. During the verdict, Marcus wanted to leave as soon as possible. After the verdict was read, Eberhardt did not show any immediate reaction. Still, his lawyer expressed disappointment with the decision. Later in a sentencing hearing, the judge sentenced him to life in prison. However, Eberhardt later released a statement expressing remorse for his actions and acknowledging the impact that his actions had on Marshall's family. "I am truly sorry for the pain that I have caused the Marshall family," said Eberhardt. "I am aware of the fact that nothing I can say or do can bring back their loved one, but I want them to know that I am taking full responsibility for my actions. I will continue to pray for them and hope that they can find some measure of peace and closure." Eberhardt's case has brought attention to the use of force by police officers and the need for accountability when officers violate departmental policies or use excessive force. Following the verdict, Marshall's family expressed relief that Eberhardt had been held accountable for his actions. Marshall's sister, Sarah Marshall, said the family was grateful for the verdict but acknowledged that it would not bring her brother back. Number 9. Daniel Saylor. Ex-Windermere Police Chief Daniel Saylor was sentenced to 8 years in prison on October 27, 2020, after being found guilty of perjury in a trial. Saylor's fall from grace was a significant one. Saylor began his career as a patrol officer in 1983 in Ohio before moving on to positions in Arizona and California. He then spent over a decade working as a chief of police in various towns in California before taking a job as the police chief of Windermere, Florida in 2011. Saylor's troubles began in 2014 when he was accused of perjury in a case involving a prominent Windermere resident. The case centered on allegations of the resident improperly expanding his home, and Saylor was accused of lying under oath during a deposition. He was subsequently arrested and charged with perjury. After a trial in 2019, Saylor was found guilty of perjury and was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Saylor was visibly upset by the sentence and had to be helped out of the courtroom. He had argued for a lighter sentence, claiming that he had already lost his job and reputation as a result of the conviction. As the judge sentenced him, he dropped down with extreme displeasure. Saylor said, "Your Honor, don't know what to say to you. I still believe what I said was the truth," said Saylor. "I'm a single father with a daughter. I served my country and the state of Florida for many years, and I find myself in this position now. I don't know what to say, Your Honor. Please have mercy on me." Saylor wiped his eyes as he tried to convince the jury that he did not lie during Bush's trial last year. He claimed he was just offering his opinion based on what his subordinate officers told him. In a statement released through his attorney, Saylor maintained his innocence and criticized the justice system. He claimed that he had been unjustly targeted by prosecutors and that his conviction was a result of prosecutorial misconduct and the willful neglect of the judge to hold the prosecutor accountable. Saylor also expressed regret over his conviction's impact on his family, particularly his wife, who had stood by him throughout the legal proceedings. He acknowledged that he had made mistakes, but maintained that he had always acted in good faith as a police officer. Number 10. Aaron Dean. Aaron Dean is a former cop who gained national attention in 2019 when he shot and took the life of Atatiana Jefferson, a 28-year-old woman, while responding to a non-emergency call in Fort Worth, Texas. The incident occurred in the early morning of October 12, 2019, when a neighbor called the police to request a wellness check on Jefferson's mother's home, where Jefferson was staying and watching her nephew. Dean arrived at the scene and committed the crime. Before joining the Fort Worth Police Department, Dean had worked as a detective with the Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport Department, ensuring public safety. He had no previous disciplinary issues during his time as a police officer. Still, his actions on the night of Jefferson's shooting violated several policies, including the department's use of force and de-escalation policies. Dean resigned from his position at the Fort Worth Police Department shortly after the shooting, but was later arrested and charged. During his trial in August 2021, a Tarrant County jury found him guilty of the lesser charge, which carries a penalty of 2 to 20 years in prison under Texas law. At the sentencing hearing on October 14, 2021, Jefferson's family members addressed Dean, expressing their grief and loss. Ashley Carr, Jefferson's sister, described her as a beautiful flower just starting to bloom and spoke on behalf of their mother, who had passed away before Dean's conviction. Dean showed no emotion as the judge read his sentence of 11 years and 10 months in prison, which is longer than the typical sentence under Texas law. Some may see it as a sign of remorselessness or a lack of understanding of the gravity of his actions. Others may argue that Dean was simply attempting to maintain his composure in a highly emotional situation. It's ultimately difficult to know for sure what was going through Dean's mind during the sentencing. Dean received 11 years and 10 months in prison. However, Dean is eligible for parole once he has served half his sentence. Dean was also questioned in court about police rules, and his answers revealed he was never fit to be a police officer. The case of Aaron Dean is a tragic reminder of the ongoing problem of police brutality and racial injustice in the United States. His conviction and sentencing may provide some measure of justice for Atatiana Jefferson and her family.